The sun in northern Florida doesn't rise, it peels. First it peels the fog off the river, then the dew off the grass, then the skin off a man's back. And if you listen closely, long before the rooster, long before the hens, you'll hear the crack. That's the sound that built Florida.
I came to the Red Hills in 1834, a young man chasing opportunity. They said the soil here was black gold, thick with promise, so rich you could toss in a seed and it would come up humming. I didn't own land, didn't own men. I just took notes, counted harvests, drew lines on paper for those who did. And in those first months, I learned quickly. This land didn't speak in cotton bolls. It spoke in lashes. They called the plantation Hollow Pines. 100 enslaved souls worked that land, all ruled by one man, not with words, but with the whip he wore on his belt like a pocket watch. Every morning, before the light had the courage to reach the fields, they moved barefoot, bent, breathing in silence. You could hear nothing but coughing and wind. Then the overseer shout, and the chain of obedience rattled into motion. I remember one boy, couldn't have been more than 10, named Elias. Sharp eyes, quick hands. He worked faster than men twice his size, not out of joy, but fear. "Faster, Ellie!" a voice barked from the edge of the field. "Yes, sir." His little fingers red from picking and his breath ragged. I saw him look toward me once, just for a second. Not pleading, just wondering why I was watching and doing nothing. That first harvest, the cotton came in thick, bale after bale, stacked like bones. The planters boasted of yields at church, while their wives debated lace colors. No one mentioned the blood on the stems. No one asked why old Martha limped after August. No one cared that Elias's cough had grown deeper by Christmas. In town, the courthouse smelled like politics and pipe smoke. Inside sat the men who claimed to guide Florida toward statehood, but in truth, they served the crop. You could see it in their clothes, linen soaked in the sweat of others. You could hear it in the way they spoke of property and didn't mean land. "We must defend our economic interests," one of them declared in a public meeting. "The North doesn't understand our way of life." Another added, "Cotton is our future, and that future must be protected by law." No one clapped. They didn't need to. Every man in that room had soil under his nails and blood in his ledger. Florida didn't become a state with fanfare. No fireworks, no brass bands. It crept in quietly, through contracts and crops, through whispered meetings in candlelit rooms where laws were written not on paper, but on backs. And while the country argued about freedom, Florida learned how to profit from bondage. That winter, I stopped writing numbers. I started writing memories. It was one morning I'll never forget. The fields were still. A thin frost clung to the edges of the grass. Elias stood near the barn, coughing hard. The overseer told him to get up. He didn't move fast enough. I said, "Move, boy!" A whip cracked. Elias stumbled forward, but the fire in him was gone. He felt his knees. I stepped forward, just a little. My boot crunched the frost. The overseer looked at me. "You got something to say, clerk?" I shook my head. Elias stood up on his own. He never looked at me again after that. And I don't blame him. Florida was not built on dreams. It was built on aching hands, on the silence of those who saw and said nothing, on the cry of a boy who had no choice but to keep picking. And every white-columned house, every law passed in town halls, every road that cuts through those red hills was paid for in flesh.
A plantation house isn't just a home, it's a theater. Every parlor, every corridor, every rocking chair on the front porch plays a role in a long and brutal performance. A performance where the audience claps with applause and the actors bleed backstage. The house at Hollow Pines was grand, all whitewashed wood and wraparound porches, polished brass, and paintings of long-dead ancestors in powdered wigs. I was invited inside only once. The master, who everyone simply called Sir, asked me to review some crop ledgers in his study. I remember how quiet it was. You wouldn't know that just 100 feet away in the cold wooden cabins, people slept side by side on straw mats, some of them with healing wounds, some of them with frostbitten fingers. But here, inside, the fire crackled and the rug was imported from Charleston. "We've had a good year," the master said, sipping bourbon. "The soil listens well to a firm hand." I didn't reply, just ran my fingers down the column of numbers. "You're a smart one," he added. "Don't let sympathy soften you. This land's too wild for soft men." That word, soft, it haunted me, as if kindness was a disease, as if mercy would ruin the cotton. The enslaved were never allowed inside unless carrying trays or scrubbing floors, but I watched how they moved when they did. Heads down, backs slightly bent, eyes trained on the floorboards. There was one girl, barely 15, named Tilda. She walked like a shadow, fast, quiet, and invisible. She poured bourbon with perfect balance and never once looked up. But I did. I watched her hands shake as the firelight flickered across her face. I saw the bruises, not old, not hidden. That night, I lingered behind, said I'd forgotten my satchel, and I wandered just a bit to the kitchen house out back. Smoke curling through the air, dogs barking somewhere in the dark. There I heard them. Tilda was whispering to an older woman. Maybe her mother, maybe not. No one spoke of family here unless it was white and written on land deeds. "He said if I drop the glass again, he'll sell me," Tilda murmured. The older woman touched her face gently. "Then we won't drop nothing." Silence. "Mama, you think God sees this? God or ghosts? Somebody got us." I left without saying a word. because if I said one, I might say too many. And in Florida, words could cost you everything, especially if they sided with the wrong skin. By spring, elections buzzed across the Red Hills. But politics here wasn't a game, it was a tool. A knife in the hands of planters carving out their future. They passed no rules. Slave patrols grew stronger. Education for coloreds was criminalized. Any hint of rebellion was met with the noose. And behind it all, the men in coats with clean hands and cruel minds whispered plans over brandy. "Florida must stand as a model," one said, pounding a table. "We will not be dictated to by northern romantics. We are cotton country, and cotton requires order." They used words like order, civilization, destiny. But what they meant was this: control, silence, chains. I once saw a man whipped for reading. A page from a discarded newspaper tucked into his shirt. He couldn't read it well, just sounded out the words in whispers at night to others like they were holy scripture. Constitution, he said slowly, his tongue dragging across the syllables. They beat him till he couldn't say his name. The next day, the page was burned in the fire, and no one read again that winter. One evening, I sat near the river, notebook in hand. I'd stopped writing ledgers weeks ago. Now I wrote what I saw. Not for anyone else, but for me. For Elias, for Tilta, for the man with the newspaper. That's when an old enslaved man came and sat near me, just far enough to be safe. He didn't say much at first, just looked out at the water. "This place, it ain't what it looked like," he said finally. "It looks like land, but is really a cage, a quiet one." I nodded. "You ever think about leaving?" I asked. He chuckled, a dry, painful laugh. "Where? Freedom doesn't come with a road sign, just more trouble." Pause. "But still, I look at that river, and I dream sometimes. Dream that maybe one day it carry me somewhere nobody owns my name." It was the first honest conversation I had since arriving. And it wasn't in the parlor or the court. It was on the bank of a river that had seen more truth than all the speeches in Tallahassee. The cotton fields kept growing. The laws kept tightening, and Florida kept marching toward statehood on the backs of broken men and women whose stories were never written, but who still dreamed beside rivers, still whispered to each other in the dark, still waited quietly for someone to finally say what they could not.
Some ghosts don't wear chains. Some wear linen suits and smile in portraits. But they haunt just the same. Florida became a state in 1845. There were no fireworks, no great parade, just the quiet turning of a page and the blood stain that wouldn't come out. The plantations thrived. Cotton stretched across the hills like a white sea. Sugarcane lined the rivers. The steamboats grew fatter, their bellies full of crops and corn. And politics, it no longer belonged to the people. It belonged to the planters. I attended a celebration the day the news arrived from Washington. Florida had joined the Union. The men wore top hats and drank aged rum. They called it a victory for sovereignty, for the Southern way of life. "We built this with our own hands," one said, lifting his glass. I looked at his hands. They were smooth, soft. I thought of Elias's hands, Tilda's, and I said nothing.
A week later, I witnessed something that unstitched whatever was left of my silence. They were selling families again. Out on the square beneath a Spanish oak, a man stood on a wooden box calling out numbers like the town crier. Beside him, 3 people, a woman, her son, and a girl no older than 6. The girl clung to her mother's skirt. The bid came fast. The boy was strong, the girl young and promising. The mother was past her prime. "Separate lot," the auctioneer shouted. The mother screamed. "No, not my babies. Please, I work till I die. Just don't." Her words drowned beneath laughter and coin. I stepped forward. I didn't know what I was going to do, just that I had legs and they moved. "Don't," someone whispered beside me. I turned. It was Tilda. She had come into town to carry bread for her mistress. "You try to stop it, they'll bury you with them." I stood still and watched that little girl get dragged one way and the boy another while the mother collapsed on the ground. No one helped her up. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn it all. I wanted to be anything but what I was, a man with a pen and a mouthful of silence. That night, I returned to Hollow Pines. I packed my satchel, burnt my ledgers, and before dawn, I walked down to the cabins, past the cotton, past the barn, past the house with its high white pillars. I left a single page wedged under the cookhouse. On it, I had written, "You are not forgotten." Then I walked for days through pine and mud and mist, following the same river the old man once dreamed about. I never returned to Florida, but the memories never left me. Every time I heard a fiddle play at night, every time I smelled smoke in the air, every time a man in a clean coat spoke about heritage, I remembered the field, the crack of the whip, the boy who wouldn't look at me again. They don't teach you this in the schools. They'll tell you Florida was tamed by visionaries, that the land bloomed under bold men, but I was there. And I saw the truth. Florida was not built. It was extracted, harvested from the backs of those who were never allowed to rest. It was a machine, oiled by sweat, powered by terror, and steered by silence. Some of those fields are gone now. The houses crumbled, their porches rotted. But when the wind blows just right through the pine, if you stand very still, you can hear something. Not the whip, not the weeping, but the breathing of those who endured. And that breathing, quiet, defiant, alive, is the sound Florida could never bury.